Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Those first 16 words of the Bill of Rights have produced voluminous court case law. This weighty volume here is just excerpts of Supreme Court cases on church-state law. Just excerpts. Interpreting and applying those principles has produced, as I mentioned, this voluminous case law. So religious liberty is a core constitutional concept. But is it the first freedom, as some of us claim? One evidence of this is the order it was listed in the Bill of Rights. And so let me read again the First Amendment to the Constitution in full. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition government for redress of grievances. So the founders devoted the first clauses of the First Amendment to ending state-enforced religion and protecting free exercise from state intrusion. Now, religious liberty enjoyed this pride of place because it was forged in the crucible of a century-long struggle against religious persecution in the colonies that went on to actually define the very American ideas of limited government and liberty. Notably, heroes of conscience jeopardized their lives and their livelihoods rather than violate their sacred beliefs. Roger Williams, for example, got banished from the colony of Massachusetts in 1835 for preaching the heretical doctrine that state coercion on religion was false to faith. In 1660, Mary Dyer was publicly hanged in Boston Common for refusing to obey the law against proselytizing her Quaker faith. There's a statue of Mary Dyer in Boston Common today. And on the eve of the American Revolution, Baptists routinely were jailed for refusing to have marriages in the state-sanctioned Anglican Church rather than their own Baptist churches. What do we learn from this record? People will endure great persecution to live by what they see as their transcendent and sacred duties. And enormous turmoil results when this quest is crushed or inhibited by the state. Let's look at one of those most fascinating heroes of conscience, Roger Williams, that I just spoke about. The fiercely independent pastor and theologian of 17th century America. After he was banished from Massachusetts, he went on to found Rhode Island, which critics called Rogues Island because it allowed all the religious dissenters. He went on and found Rhode Island as a haven for religious liberty. While in England seeking a charter for his colony, he penned his famous tract, The Bloody Tenet of Persecution for the Cause of Faith, which was published in England in 1644. The ground for, he made the argument, the timeless argument in this document, that religious faith to be genuine must be free. And the ground for that liberty, moreover, was what he called soul freedom. The doctrine that all people have the right to follow their convictions on religious matters because conscience is itself from God. Remarkably consistent, he actually argued that because conscience is God-given and sacred, it should be extended to Quakers, Catholics, women, Indians, Muslims, and atheists in 1644. Because they are all entitled, indeed called, to live by the sacred truths as they understand them. What is so striking about these ideas is how they echo a century later in the thought and work of James Madison, the author of the American First Amendment. Something I don't think is as well appreciated. Madison's ideas flowed, in fact, from a deep wellspring of religious experience and reflection in the American colonies, and he drew inspiration from the heroes of conscience like Roger Williams, who made the case for conscience and endured persecution and developed theologies of religious liberty that would underpin his own ideas. So let's look at how those ideas of James Madison played out. In May of 1776, Virginia held a convention and issued its Declaration of Rights just 2 months before the American Revolution. Originally drafted by George Mason, there was a provision in those declarations on religious liberty. It read as follows, quote, "All men should enjoy the fullest toleration in the exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience." Madison, at age 25, and a delegate at the convention, was troubled by this language of toleration, which to him suggested a kind of condescension that could be removed at will. Or, as George Washington later put it, it was as if it was by the indulgence of one class of people that another class of people enjoyed their natural rights. So Madison insisted on an amendment to that declaration to protect the free exercise of religion, not the toleration of religion, and then anchored that right in transcendent obligations, just as Roger Williams did. This is the final language of the Virginia Declaration, and I think it's a great document. Quote, "That religion, or the duty which we owe to our Creator, and the manner of discharging it, can be directed only by reason and conviction, not by force and violence. Therefore, all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion according to the dictates of conscience." Unquote. A decade later, in 1885, Madison became embroiled in a controversy over Patrick Henry's bill to levy assessments to support churches in Virginia. So he penned his famous memorial and remonstrance against religious assessments. But once again, he anchored that document in the duty to fulfill transcendent obligations. This is what he wrote in what I consider the ur-text of American religious liberty. Quote, "Before any man can be considered a member of civil society, he must be considered as a subject of the governor of the universe. Thus, religion, or the duty which we owe our Creator, is precedent both in order of time and degree of obligation to the claims of civil society. In matters of religion, therefore, no man's right is abridged by the institution of civil society." If you want to get philosophically fancy, you can say that religious liberty was ontologically prior to the claims of civil society. Religious liberty, in other words, is the first freedom because it embodies a person's highest obligations. It's not just the freedom to do your own thing, it's the freedom to act on your highest obligations or transcendent duties, which flow from an authority higher than the state. Or as Cardinal Newman put it, conscience has rights because it has duties. A key measure, in my view, of a free society is the extent to which it does not force you to choose between your sacred duties and your citizenship rights or responsibilities. Just a few years after articulating this idea in his memorial, Madison was able to embed this principle as the author of the First Amendment. Now, I find it fascinating that the First Amendment to the Constitution, that great document of our constitutional law, began as a campaign promise James Madison made when he ran for Congress in 1789. He pledged that he would introduce the First Amendment on religion and other protections of liberty as a campaign promise. And then he introduced that in the first Congress and shepherded through the legislature. As embodied in the First Amendment that James Madison both wrote and shepherded through Congress, the American Constitution represented a break from 13 centuries of state-enforced religion in the West. By prohibiting the infringement on religious exercise, it provided a crucial limit on the reach of state power. By freeing churches from state persecution or paternalism, it also propelled a thriving civil society of voluntary association and shaped a culture of unusual religious amity. Religious liberty served as the first freedom because it profoundly shaped our polity and society. It provided a crucial limit, as I mentioned, on state power. It propelled thriving civil society. And it produced what Putnam and Campbell call American grace, a society that's vibrantly religious but also remarkably tolerant. Now consider the flag salute cases of the 1940s that inaugurated modern free exercise jurisprudence as a great example of this legacy. Jehovah's Witnesses sought to have their children exempted from school board mandated Pledge of Allegiance on the ground that it amounted to them a form of idolatry forbidden by their faith. To them it imperiled their souls. The Supreme Court originally came down against the Jehovah's Witnesses, requiring witness children to salute the American flag like this, which to them was a graven image. The witnesses couldn't back down, and as a result, children were harassed, beaten up, kicked out of school, and their parents forced to send their kids to private schools. The sympathy that this harassment evoked led the court to reconsider. When the Supreme Court dramatically reversed itself in West Virginia v. Barnett, it signaled that the abridgment of conscience need not be, as one scholar put it, unfortunate collateral damage of law. In other words, the state should not invade what Justice Jackson called the sphere of intellect and spirit that represents a zone the Constitution was intended to protect. Now that which gives meaning and purpose to life, I submit, should enjoy elevated status in a free society. Or to use a legal principle, courts should employ a high level of scrutiny in weighing burdens on religious exercise. Though questioned in legal circles, this remains a strong element of the American DNA. And that DNA helps explain why we continue to have fierce battles over religious liberty today. Whether it is Native Americans fighting to protect sacred lands, American Sikhs fighting against discrimination, or even the owners of Hobby Lobby fighting for the right to operate in conformance with their religious principles, we see this continuing struggle of diverse people to live according to their highest obligations, whatever we might think of particular cases or legal doctrines. To me, it is something remarkable and inspiring how the American constitutional heritage on religion endures as a central feature and aspiration of our law, politics, and society. Or as one Sikh leader told me, here in America, you can be who you are. As we look around the world at the violence and turmoil produced by religious repression, we can understand the achievement of the religion clauses in America, which represents, in the words of one scholar, articles of our collective peace. Thank you very much.
Freedom 101 is made possible by generous support from the University of Oklahoma Alumni Association. Freedom 101 is a program of the Institute for the American Constitutional Heritage at the University of Oklahoma. For more videos and podcasts, visit freedom.ou.edu.